Hello everybody, welcome back to another deep dive video this week. This week we are doing the Philadelphia Eagles. They went 11-6 and ended up winning the NFC East and getting knocked out of the first round of the playoffs. First of all, this was kind of under my expectations for this team. They were the reigning Super Bowl champions after dismantling the Chiefs like they did last year in the Super Bowl, and they kind of underperformed this year. That was an issue that could have been solved very easily by making a change at offensive coordinator much sooner in the season than they did. But to be fair, the first half of the season, they looked like the same old Eagles that would go out and dominate teams and continue to win the division and stuff like that. But as the season grew on, you kind of find out that the team's a little one-dimensional. Saquon's not the absolute super beast he was last year. Jalen seems a little more timid to throw the football down the field. AJ Brown is having some locker room issues and some problems with everybody else. Devontae Smith still looked pretty good. Goddard was injured a couple of times during the year, but it just wasn't the Super Bowl winning Eagles you got last year, and it just kind of fell apart near the end of the year, resulting in a knockout of the playoffs by the 49ers. Now, obviously, that's not a bad year in perchance. A lot of teams would kill for an 11-6 year like that, but for the Eagles doing what they did last year, that is kind of a letdown and below the expectations they had for the season. Some key games for the Eagles were the first game against the Cowboys. They ended up winning that game 24-20. Their defense looked good and their offense looked like it was movable at the time. There was nothing too blaringly wrong with it. They were able to exploit the Cowboys' weaknesses and go from there. Next up, you had the Rams game. They had a really good comeback in that game and ended up winning after blocking a field goal and returning it for a touchdown. You looked really good there because at the time everybody was hyping up the Rams and they looked really good. And obviously you saw how far the Rams went in the playoffs, but it was a great win by the Eagles there. You end up starting the year 4-0, looking pretty good. Then you lose the next two games to the Broncos and the Giants, and that's all right. It happens. You go on to win the next four, and it ends up, you're primed for the division win. You are 8-2, looking good, and then all of a sudden, you lose to the Cowboys in a bad fashion. You were up 21-0, and you blew the game, and they won 24-21, and then you lose to the Bears, and then you lose to the Chargers, and you start to see through some of these games a trend with the offense that was pretty much the reason that dragged this season down for the Eagles. To me, it seemed that Jalen Hurts was very gun shy near the end of the year. When he did let it rip, it wasn't very accurate. And then when he wanted to, he just couldn't let it rip. He was afraid of overthrowing, underthrowing. They were having some issues between him and AJ Brown. He just wasn't able to connect with AJ Brown as much as AJ would like to, which is resulting in a very turbulent offseason for the Eagles right now between AJ Brown and them. Still up in the air on whether he's getting traded or not. But it's just the predictability of the offense. You know the meme: Saquon up the middle, Saquon up the middle, AJ Brown deep ball, and then you punt. That was not as much of a joke as you think it was, because that was pretty much the Eagles' offense. It would be handoff, handoff. You'd get stuffed like once or twice, or pick up maybe 5 yards, and then you would attempt a deep ball. It was just terrible play calling and game planning by Spatullo. Spatullo was the offense coordinator at the time, and he was the one who needed to go. And it just took Sirianni way too long to make that change, but he eventually did. And it just sputtered. In the offense, you just could tell this team wasn't going anywhere. Despite the defense being really good, like always, you just tell the offense was not going to let this team make a deep playoff run. The Eagles' biggest acquisition on the year to help them bolster this team came in the form of Jalen Phillips. They made a trade with the Dolphins to get the edge rusher to kind of help them out because they had Jordan Davis, they had Jalen Carter, and they have Smith and Dean, who are linebackers but can come off the edge. And of course, they drafted Jahad Campbell in the offseason, but they needed a more established edge rusher, and that's when they went out and got Phillips. It was a pretty good move. He is not with the team anymore. He went and signed with the Panthers, but he was a solid move to help bolster the defense. They also had a second round pick in safety Andrew Makuba. I thought he played pretty well during the year. Looked like he could be uh, very good young rookie. Too bad he got injured at some point, and it's kind of didn't help their case. Obviously, they still had a stellar defense amongst Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Carter, and they, of course, Zach Bond was still there. They they had the recipe for a good team. Obviously, they fire the offense coordinator and hire Sean Mannion as a new offense coordinator. I think it was a pretty safe hire. It's going to be a wait and see if he can turn the offensive round. I've heard some reports about Jalen Hurts not being very coachable. I don't necessarily know how true that is because he's been in the league a long time and he's won a Super Bowl, so I doubt he's uncoachable, but there might be some tendencies where he doesn't want to change. But the biggest blow the Eagles took this offseason had to be when their offensive line coach, Jeff Stoutland, ended up retiring. He is the offensive line guru for the past 13 years that has kept that O line at like top shape. I mean, like top shape. He's produced Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, many others that I can't think of off the top of my head at the moment. But he was just a really good O line coach, and losing someone like him is kind of a big blow. Now you can go get a replacement. That probably wouldn't be too hard, knowing Howie Roseman and the GM he is, the guru himself. But it just hurts when a longtime coach like that ends up retiring. Then you had Lane Johnson and them end up debating retirement, but it looks like they're going to return for another year, which shifts your looks towards the draft. And now you might have to think about drafting a successor for those tackles and everything else like that. And then now you got to look into getting maybe a receiver, because if you end up dealing AJ Brown to someone else, you're definitely going to need a receiver to replace him, because you've got Devontae Smith. They signed Hollywood Brown, which it's okay, but it's not the best receiving core. You still have Dallas Goddard and everything else like that. That doesn't hurt too much. You still have a solid tight end. Now you could obviously draft Kenyon Sadiq and solidify the tight end position, but I would say you either go O line or receiver if I'm the Eagles here in this draft. I can see them definitely trying to trade up for it, but I think they're one of those teams that can just sit on what they have, draft the guys they feel like they need, and just keep going forward from there. Uh, in the offseason, their biggest signing was probably Tariq Woolen. Actually, it was Tariq Woolen, just because they didn't really sign too much of anyone else. They were kind of quiet this offseason for once, which is rare for them. But I kind of expected the Eagles to be a more big draft offseason than they were signing offseason, because frankly, they weren't losing too many pieces to free agency. They lost Reed Blankenship to the Texans, and then of course Jalen Phillips went with the Panthers. But other than that, they shopped around Jalen Carter. They still have pretty much most of their team together. They're shopping around AJ Brown, if not trying to keep him or convince him to stay. But yeah, it was more of the Eagles go into this looking to draft, and I could see them going after guys like Omar Cooper Jr., out of Indiana. I think he'd be a good pick for them. You could see them going for Keeldrick Falk, the edge out of Auburn, Spencer Fano, Monroe Feeling. They can kind of play around with this pick. They got a couple areas of need, but nothing too blaring other than I'd say wide receiver. You need to get a receiver. It's just, I think you're going to trade A.J. Brown. I think you're going to get a really good deal out of him. And you just need to select someone who can come in and kind of play a little bit of the role of him. Obviously, you're not always going to strike gold, but if you can find another A.J. Brown, that's perfect. Obviously, you know, it's in a perfect world, but the Eagles look out with Howie Roseman as their GM. He's always been really good at drafting. He's always been really good at signing players and developing them and everything else like that. So the Eagles get a boost this offseason for me just because of Howie Roseman, and that's about it. Going forward next year, I could see them going another 12-win season. I think their floor ends up being 8 and 9, and I think their ceiling ends up being, I'd say, 13-4, something around there. It really just depends if Jalen Hurts can get back to form. We all know Jalen Hurts can play good. We hear all the jokes. I for one, believe he is good. I don't believe he's great. I don't believe he's bad. I believe he is good. And that's all he needs to be. In a team that's built to support him, all you have to be is good. You still got Devontae Smith. You still got Goddard. You still got Saquon Barkley. You still have an insanely solid O-line and a really good defense. You just have to go out there and play like the team you know you are. The Eagles became the first team in the NFC East to actually win back-to-back divisions. I don't know if they win it again because I think the Commanders had a really good offseason and could push for it, but I could see them winning three divisional titles in a row. I think the NFC East got better as a whole this offseason between the Cowboys and the Commanders and the Giants. I believe all those three teams got better as a whole. I arguably cannot say that the Eagles got better, but they didn't get too much worse. So in the end, I can see them around a probably another 11-6, 12-5 type of record. They will always be probably a contending team until something like goes very wrong for them. Like say Jalen Hurts just completely loses it and becomes very turnover prone, or too many injuries happen, or Sirianni, which he's already kind of getting there, but Sirianni just becomes one of the worst coaches I've seen in decision making. He's okay right now, but he's become questionable last year, and obviously can't really go too hard on him because he's brought them to two Super Bowls and won one, so that's more than most other coaches could say. But like I said, I believe next year they go another 11-6, 12-5 season. They'll make the playoffs either as a high wild card or they'll take the division again. And I think they end up a second round exit unless the team comes out for them next year and shows that they are a completely different team and turned around and the offense looks like it's functional and the defense stays to form. I don't think they'll go any higher than that. It just all depends. It's deep in the off season and the draft is still yet to come. They can show everybody through the draft like they could be aggressive and maybe change the narrative around the offseason. But as of right now, I still think they're the same old Eagles. They'll end up going where they are and being a playoff team. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the Philadelphia Eagles deep dive for the offseason. I hope you guys enjoyed. Give us a like and a subscribe and comment down below. And yeah, goodbye.